Jason Jam Master J. Mizell didn't just scratch records, he scratched hip-hop's future onto wax. He helped crown Run-DMC the first rap group on MTV, the first to go platinum, the first to ink $1 million sneaker deal. Yet, on 28 February 2024, 22 years after a masked gunman ended his life inside Studio 24, a Brooklyn jury finally stamped 2 names on the crime. Justice, reporters said, had arrived, but peel back the verdict and a darker double life, riddled with debts, silence, and fear, still hums beneath the needle. In the early 1980s, Hollis, Queens pulsed with Basement Party. Jay's nimble crossfades fused reggae bass lines to Bronx breakbeat, convincing high school friends Joseph Run Simmons and Run-DMC McDaniels that a DJ could be more than background noise. Their debut album, Run-DMC, blasted through 500,000 copies. Follow-up King of Rock went gold in 5 weeks. MTV rotated Rockbox, making them the channel's first rap regulars. Then Adidas watched fans hold up shell toes at Madison Square Garden and cut a landmark $1 million endorsement. A first for hip-hop. Money rolled in, but Jay saw farther than arena lights. Between stadium shows, he slipped back to Hollis, hosting free block parties so kids could grab a microphone instead of a weapon. The turntable king was already blueprinting his next empire and his next generation. But success writes expensive invoices, and by the late 90s, the numbers stopped adding up. Tour revenue dipped when newer sounds eclipsed boom bap. Jay answered by pouring savings into a storefront, Scratch DJ Academy, a hands-on school he envisioned as a pipeline out of street hustle and into music careers. He signed hardcore group Onyx to his JMJ label and spotted a teenage Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, telling Columbia Records, "That kid'll sell $1 million." But studio upkeep, staff salaries, and charitable giveaways strained his cushion. Friends later testified the DJ started moving a kilo or 2 of cocaine to bridge the gap, a side hustle that clashed brutally with Run-DMC's anti-drug image. That quiet cash stream would steer 2 doomed associates toward Studio 24 on a rainy October night. At 7:30 p.m., Jay relaxed in Lounge A, headphones dangling. Witnesses say childhood friend Ronald Tinnard Washington and godson Carl Little D. Jordan Jr. arrived unarmed, joked about new tracks, then left. Minutes later, they returned masked. Jordan fired a 40 cal round into Jay's head. Engineer Tony Rincon caught a stray bullet in his leg. The rest of the room froze. No cash was taken, no jewelry snatched. Within an hour, hip-hop radio mourned the architect of Walk This Way. Family mourners soon learned police had almost 0 cooperative witnesses. Fear sealed their mouths before detectives could press record. And so began 22 years of conspiracy theory, dead lead, and evidence that seemed to vanish before hitting daylight. Tabloids floated everything: a rogue cop cover-up, a revenge hit ordered by rival label, even whispers that Jay's generosity threatened local dealers. Investigators privately blamed street code. Publicly, they begged witnesses to talk. Anonymous tips named Jordan and Washington as early as 2003. But terrified insiders backpedaled when subpoenas landed. The case file fattened, momentum starved. Meanwhile, Run and DMC retired the group, declaring, "Without Jay, there is no Run-DMC." Scratch DJ Academy soldiered on, a living memorial teaching teens to baby scratch on battered mixers. Fans asked every anniversary, "Who killed Jam Master Jay?" And the NYPD had no new press conference to offer. Then, in 2020, a federal state task force cracked open an old wiretap and found a voice that wouldn't stay silent. Detectives revisited cell tower data, street camera, and a dusty baseball cap left at the scene. DNA pointed to Jay Bryant, a small-time dealer who, according to prosecutors, propped open Studio 24's back door for Jordan and Washington. Bryant's DNA plus a refreshed witness lineup finally convinced the Eastern District of New York to impanel a grand jury. 18 years after the murder, federal marshals cuffed Jordan and Washington on charges of firearm-related murder while executing a narcotics conspiracy. Court papers rappers painted the motive. Jay planned a 10-kilo shipment to Baltimore that could net $200,000. When he cut Washington from the deal, Washington convinced Jordan that betrayal required blood. But indictments don't equal closure, and an anxious hip-hop community braced for courtroom drama. Opening arguments began 29th of January 2024. Prosecutors produced the studio's wounded survivor, Tony Rincon. Limping to the stand, he relived the muzzle flash. Another key witness, Jay's former protege Uriel Tony Rivas, initially refused to testify until federal protection kicked in. Under oath, he revealed Jay's debt spiral and small-scale coke runs to keep the lights on. Defense lawyers hammered credibility, calling the statements memory molded by detectives. 3 days of deliberation ended 28 February, guilty on all counts. Outside the courthouse, Daryl McDaniels called the verdict bittersweet and a reminder that street choices strangle art. Yet even that decisive moment triggered new headlines. Inside a detention center hallway, while awaiting formal sentencing at Brooklyn's MDC, Carl Jordan Jr. was stabbed 18 times in a gang-related brawl. Doctors listed him as stable, but the attack reignited chatter about whether an appeals strategy might cite jail conditions. Ronald Washington, already serving a federal term for robbery, sits in solitary, claiming he's the fall guy. Meanwhile, Jay Bryant, the alleged doorman, faces trial in January 2025 as prosecutors negotiate a possible plea. Legal experts warn any reversal could drag proceedings well into Jay's children's middle age, a haunting timeline for closure. And while courts grind, pop culture rewind. February 2024 also delivered Kings from Queens, the Run-DMC story, a 3-part Peacock doc that reignited Adidas streams and taught Gen Z the thunder of Peter Piper. Hollis renamed a block Run-DMC JMJ Way, and Scratch DJ Academy hosted a 24-hour scratch marathon for charity. Still, older fans argue the verdict ripped off a Band-Aid. Yes, we know the triggermen, but the economic chokehold that nudged a philanthropic legend toward risky product? That conversation barely starts before the outro music rolls. Jam Master Jay's life arcs like a perfect scratch. Vinyl ascent, a jarring reverse, then a slow fade nobody wanted. He spun global charts, yet poured time into teenagers who couldn't afford headphones. He swore off drugs in lyrics, yet hustled powder to fund that generosity. And the culture that crowned him pioneer left his family in investigative limbo for 2 full decades. So, does a 22-year late verdict deliver justice? Or does it spotlight hip-hop's hardest paradox, that an art built on escape routes too often drags its architects back into the very streets they dreamed of leaving? Drop your take below, and if these twists flipped your memory of Run-DMC's smiling DJ, hit subscribe, because the story of hip-hop's unsolved mysteries is far from an A-side. Sometimes the darkest truth hides on the remix.